Hello everyone, Lilou here. I'm interviewing today Allant Hunter, the author of the Six Archetypes of Love. Love, love, love. Let's learn all about love. Hello, Allan.
Hello, Lilou.
I'm excited to have you. I loved your book. And I want to start right off by asking you on page 19, there's this beautiful quote that says that love is like gravity. Tell me about that.
Oh, love is like gravity because gravity is everywhere, but everyone overlooks it the whole time. Gravity is what keeps things in place, and without that fundamental force in the universe, nothing much can happen.
Yeah.
Love is the same way in all its different forms, whether it's love of friends, love of a significant other, love and passion for what you do. But without it, nothing much can happen. Without gravity, the universe would not revolve in its wondrous and peculiar ways. So, yes, when I compared it to gravity, I was quite specific in saying this is one of the fundamental movers and forces in our world.
So you would say, you're saying in your book that actually our mission in life as human being is to find love and discover love. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, yes, I think it's actually impossible not to encounter love in some form. The only person who wouldn't encounter it, presumably, is someone who lived totally alone down the bottom of a coal mine. But when when we go into the world, we have to interact with other people. We have to do it in a reasonable way, and that means we have to both treat ourselves with respect, self-love,
Mm-hmm.
and treat them with some respect. And from that grows an awareness that there are some people that we feel closer to than others. And gradually we become aware that there is a feeling, a fellow feeling, between human beings, and in some places it's more intense and it feels more vital than in others. And that's perhaps our first introduction to love as we go into the world. But having said that, there's something even more basic and even more mysterious, and that is when we're born, uh, the first thing we do is we find ourselves dependent upon our mothers, and our mothers, God bless them, they love us. Without that loving bond, the child doesn't last more than a couple of hours. Without that instinctual turning to the mother who is going to look after us and feed us, we're not going to be alive for very long. Now you can say, oh, that's instinct. But I would say that that is a very, very powerful instinct, like gravity. It can't be argued against. And what a baby knows right from the get-go, right from that first moment, what a baby knows is how to love and how to trust. And if you go through the rest of your life without those two features, you won't have a decent adult relationship with anyone ever.
Well, you're
So,
bringing up you're bringing a good point, Alan, and that's something I read in your book, and I was especially interested about since I'm a divorced child.
uh,
I was interested to read about the part where you're talking about a child that were abandoned or a
yeah.
child that had divorced parents. So somewhere along that way at a young age, some of us got betrayed or lost that trust. How can you regain that actually? Is it possible to heal that part of ourselves to be ready one day to fully love?
Oh yes, absolutely. And I think I would take issue with your language because I don't think we ever lose that basic sense of love and trust. We cover it over, we pretend it isn't there because we want to protect ourselves from being hurt again. And
Right.
that in archetypal terms, that's when we become what I call orphans, when we're looking around for someone to look after us, but we don't really belong, which is of course what the orphan is likely to feel. At our core, we know we're lovable, we know we can love, and we know that this vital connection exists.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes we don't have the courage, we don't have the strength to live that way. So this is something that is deep inside us that to some extent we have to bring to the surface, and that's a real life task because it takes courage, it takes patience, but it never goes away.
So I'm going to ask you in another part of this interview a bit more about archetypes, because you definitely describe those very well, and we'll get into some specific type of archetypes. For example, Princess Diana, that was an
Oh,
orphan archetypes. So I
yes.
want to learn a little bit more about that. But so just to complete that conversation on this love and this maybe this trust that needs to be regained, how can we bridge that? What's that bridge? What do we get to another archetype? I mean, how, without getting too
Yes.
much in archetypes, what is
Yeah.
that missing link again? What is the next step to
The
take?
next, yes, is a really good question, and it will involve me talking about archetypes a little,
Okay.
but I'll keep it straightforward. The first step, the most important step, is to realize that we have this idealism, this desire to love fully, and that we're not doing it. And
Hmm.
many people say, "Oh, that's a real threat. I think I'll just do what everyone else does, which is I'll make do with second best. I will settle for whoever happens to be convenient as a life partner, and I won't think about it too much." And that's when we shortchange ourselves. Now, when we have that feeling, oh, that there's more here, and I better find out what it is, and I better find out how to mobilize it, that is the first step of what I would call real courage. Real courage. A person steps forward and says, I'm not going to do what everyone else does, and I don't care if it's inconvenient. I don't care if my father keeps saying, why don't you marry this person, and why don't. I'm going to find out what it's all about. And that's the start of the real life journey. But without that little bit of discontent, that little bit of courage, that little bit of who cares, or I don't care what anyone else says, nothing much is going to change.
Yeah.
That's why it's called a journey. You have to set off on a journey.
You have to be willing to take the risk again. That's what I hear.
Oh, yes, and not just once, but perhaps several times. Yes, that's the difficult bit, isn't
Thank
it?
you, Allan. Allan is author of the archetypes, the Six Archetypes of Love. Thank you, Allan, and I'll see you
Thank you.
right away in part two. I have lots more questions for you. Thank you for being here today.
A pleasure, a pleasure.